Judging by the extremely vehement response to something I posted recently, this has to be said. The lack of political education in this country is not merely a right-wing phenomenon. I said something that I thought was pretty elemental, that liberalism was always essentially a middle position. It was always a compromise between leftists and conservatives, right? That's the entire idea of the ideology. And that's why people a long time ago, for decades, have been saying that liberals are moderates, liberals are centrists, because that was always the stated intention of that ideology. Now, let me say this very clearly. I am not dunking on liberals. This is something that I didn't know until like 10 years ago when I got my political education from people who had been further left than I was. When I first discovered that none of this is new and that people have always been wary of liberalism as an ideology because it was never intended to be for the people. It was intended to be a compromise between conservative ideology and the communist, socialist, anarchist that had been absolutely scrubbed from all political life by the McCarthy era. When people say liberals aren't leftists, a lot of liberals view it as an insult, but it's not. Now, if you want to be a leftist, please do, right? Get some more political education and understand that middle of the road, wonky stuff that is all about nibbling around the edges of the current system was always going to be essentially a capitulation to the way that things are, to the status quo in some way. And usually it's pushed by people who are college educated, who have a vested interest, essentially, in keeping things roughly as they are, even though they're against the worst of what the right wing in this country, which is what this country was founded on, has to offer. But the problem is that when you're trying to compromise between let's enslave or exterminate people and hey, how about absolutely not, fuck that, and you are leaning more towards the side of who's in power because you favor the structure, right? Because you want to keep the structure basically intact, that's why the Overton window keeps shifting. And the problem is that since conservative and liberal has been the only game in town, right? It's been the only thing that anybody talks about, but that's not ever really been the actual divide. Liberals are a middle position by definition. Again, I am not making this up out of whole cloth. People like, Malcolm X and Malik Shabazz said the same thing about liberals, about the white moderate. And that is who they were talking about. Because the idea is, and I say this all the time in my own words, y'all are essentially always compromising between your most racist family member and the people who you view as like the loony left, right? As the radical radicals. And there is no compromise between let's exterminate people and hey, absolutely the fuck not. There isn't a compromise between that, right? And because liberal and conservative were the only things that anybody talks about, because the acceptable discourse in this country has been taken so far away from, again, because of the McCarthy era. This happened long, long ago, and we forgot that it happened. But now we're out of runway. The Overton window can't get any further right than fascism. And what fascism does is it reveals that the conservative position always was going to lead to these really hard lines about who's acceptable, who's not acceptable, whose life has value, whose life doesn't have value, what we are willing to do to people who are not in the chosen group. That's where we are now. And that's when it has become very, very clear that you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice between, yes, let's throw people into alligator Auschwitz, and hey, how about we absolutely fucking not do that? I hope you choose wisely, choose well, and choose now.